Hi, everyone. My name is Leslie Roberts. I'm a principal lecturer in the Conflict Resolution Program in the Department of Public Administration with Dr. Whitson. And I focus on conflict as a process. I'm a lawyer. I've practiced in a number of places. I've lived in Europe, obviously lived in the United States, but I've done a lot of business and a lot of lobbying in China, Russia, worked in Ukraine some, the EU, Mexico. And so my perspective is really about the practical realities of how things actually work. I can't say that I have a strong ideology based on years of research and study, because my focus was always find a solution to the problem in the Russian market, getting legislation passed or getting my language in the bill to get that problem resolved. Or when my client, my company was kicked out of China, how we got back into business in 6 months in China. So my perspective is less about ideology. And I'm not a political science researcher, expert. I started in poli-sci and switched to communication, but it's a hobby of mine. And so I do care about the policy, but I'm going to speak to you more about the realities. I've worked with Congress a lot. I've worked with the White House a lot. I've done a lot of work with governments at the local, medium, and national levels to solve problems. And so what I want to look at is not just how did we get here, what are some of the things that they have mentioned that I think probably contribute. And I have some questions for all of you about what about this and what about that, because we don't really know what's in Putin's mind. We can only guess based on his actions, maybe not even his words, but maybe just his actions. And so I want to just propose some thoughts about what could help us get into a better place and get this resolved. So I want us to think short term, which we are all very good at, but I'm going to beg you to think long term, which we are not very good at. Those who think long term tend to live in other countries. We are good at the short term. But if you think about the short term, some immediate steps are already underway, and you can see very quickly how groundswell in Americans' opinions can create change. Talking with members of Congress, and I used to be a lobbyist as well in my practice, I learned about grassroots opinion and how to change opinions, not only at the state level, but more importantly at the federal level, by working with grassroots organizations. We've seen it very, very quickly how banning Russian oil has switched. 3 days ago, it was no. The answer was no. Didn't President Biden announce that we are going to ban all sale of Russian oil today? Right. Where do you think that came from? Congressional pressure and Americans' opinions, right? Came very quickly. Democracies move more slowly than those governments based on the individual opinion of a dictator or a small circle of people, like a dictator and the oligarchs, right? But democracies work more slowly, but this was really pretty fast. What could we do short of putting our own planes to create a no-fly zone? We could convince the Israelis to put in the batteries of Iron Dome defense weapons, because that is very defensive. And I see a head nodding or shaking back there. The Israelis have so far said no. Why would it be in Israel's interest to do that when they are dependent on Russia to bomb parts of Syria to protect themselves, right? Why would they do that? Shouldn't the United States look at its role in the JCPOA as a trade-off with Israel? Because this is actually something that Israel is quite opposed to. Personally, I believe we should not be in the JCPOA, but this is another good lever to use in getting Israel to provide that. And it wouldn't require shooting any planes down by our planes, US or NATO. It's a defense system that shoots down intruders, Russian intruders, into the country of Ukraine. I think that there's there is increasing support for that, and talking with members of Congress. I talked with one just yesterday who was quite concerned about the fact that we have said for years, although we're saying it more loudly now and more clearly and in unison, that we have no intention of getting into a direct conflict with Russia. So from a negotiation standpoint, why would you tell your adversary, who happens to be a bully, what you're not going to do? And I know that's been an American policy since World War II, when we used nuclear weapons. But why would we ever advertise that we won't? Now, I'm not suggesting that we do use them at all, right? That would be catastrophic. But why do you tell your adversary what you won't do, whether it's use those or something else? And so I'm wondering if we should be much more practical and much more realistic in dealing with bad actors like this. Another thing is that there are about 80 more oligarchs who can be sanctioned. Why aren't we sanctioning them? We sanctioned about 12. Half of every oligarch's money is Putin's money. Why are we not going there? And I know we've created a task force, but that will probably take a long time. We should be doing that. We should be doing a number of other things that will help us in the short term. But I think as Americans, we have to think more in the long term. A couple of things that we should be doing in the long term where we won't see an immediate change, but these things will happen again. And I'm frightened by the fact that China has obvious interest on taking Taiwan as a runaway province. And so I think we should be thinking along those lines longer term. But if we don't protect our satellites, we don't protect our cyber defense, and we don't go on offense possibly more often, and we don't become more energy independent again, we're going to be experiencing these same things again. And all of these things make it difficult for any of us to do business or have a relationship with bad actors. Our businesses in these countries, I mean, these countries, you know, I was there many times working on business issues, and I'm sure those companies can no longer allow Americans to go there to do the business. So it really, really harms a lot of different relationships. And I think that we have to think short term and be very, very mindful about what needs to happen versus what we would like to have happen. And then we think more strategically long term, because I do think it takes some of both to make this, to provide him an off ramp if he wants one, if he's looking for one. And I do think that unless Kiev is taken tonight and it's obliterated, as Grozny was, China will not look at Russia as the partner, that even though a smaller partner, they won't look at Russia as the partner that they'd hoped that they would be. So we should be thinking about what we can do to get this to end as quickly as possible with the least amount of damage to Ukraine and the Ukrainian people, with an eye on what it means for China and Iran, because those are the two other, I think, bad actors. As benign as you all might think China is, I've worked there, I've dealt with the foreign ministry, I've worked with many agencies there. I don't think that they are a benign actor. They've shared with me how they go into countries and accomplish certain goals. I don't think that they're benign at all, despite the fact that I once worked on their accession to the WTO on the Hill. I do not believe that they are a benign actor.
It was very interesting that you mentioned about the oligarchs and taking their assets. Italy has done that, and they have not slowed down yet. Also, as from the legal perspective, there have been some Americans that have been taken hostage in Russia. How recently a woman, a basketball woman, has been on to Congressional, and she's now in jail
For 3 weeks.
Yes, yes. And how do you think is that going to be a result from this point of where we are dealing with right now?
Well, that creates great leverage because Americans are very sympathetic of Americans being taken hostage. We always say that we don't negotiate for those types of things, and yet we do. We do all the time. What my experience is that the company, the WNBA, and then the team itself is probably negotiating right now to pay a ransom to get her released. I know my former companies would have done the same thing for me. I was an executive at Mary Kay for a long time, and I know that when I was in DC on September 11th, Richard Rogers, Mary Kay's son, would have moved heaven and earth to get us home sooner than we were able to get home. So I know those, the WNBA and her team, it's a Arizona team, right? Yeah, I'm sure that they're negotiating and getting ready to pay a ransom if that's required, but I have a feeling it's not about the money. They want something else. So they have to identify, what does he want to release her? And so that's hopefully what they're working on. What do you think that he wants? What do you think he wants from them or us to release her? What will, I think he's really screaming loudly for respect right now.
Oh, we've been doing that for 20 years.
Right, but he can never be satisfied, right? So what kind of respect, active respect, could they give that would cause them to release her? It's hard to know how to please someone who's insatiable, is it not?
I think one thing you might do and what you want. Same thing Kim Jong-un wants. He wants a high-profile summit invited. He wants the U.S. to come to him.
That's right,
Begging for some kind of end to the war.
right.
That's what Kim Jong-un wanted. We obliged him, but you know,
My fear is that he'll get it.
yeah, he might, but not now, not yet, not for Brian, not for Freddie Griner. Not yet.
I would think not for one person, but if they take more hostages, particularly high profile. I mean, I can think of my colleagues who've probably just left because of that reason, because of the risk of being taken hostage. So think about the realities though, right? Problem solving is so important, and thinking about, what does that party need to change?
Side
This is
ever,
what you
but
want.
there's no need to wait. There's
Thank you very much, Leslie.